to the very first episode of Mission Improbable for the 2019 NFL season. I'm Lewis Glover from Fantasy Football Down Under and Director of Fantasy Football for the Vault Studio. And joining me is my good friend, Luca from Sideline Spice. Luca, how you doing, pal?
I'm doing fantastic. Football's in the air. The wait is almost over, and I'm excited to get back on the Mission Improbable with you.
Absolutely. So people might remember we did one episode last season. It was sort of a soft launch, a test run to see how we would go and get comfortable with the format. But I'm really excited as Fantasy Football Down Under, and I know the guys at Sideline Spice are really excited for this collaboration that we'll be putting out. This episode is going to be some of our favorite season-long player prop bets, and hopefully on a week-to-week basis, we'll be able to bring you a weekly video with our favorite prop bets of the week. So without further ado, I think we should get into these prop bets.
Yeah, and before we get into them, we'll say it with a caveat that we're not licensed professionals. Bet at your own risk. But having said that, some research has gone into some of the lines we've picked, and we do feel good about them. If we didn't, we wouldn't be presenting them to you on video today. So yeah, with that being said, Lewis, what have you got for us first?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I am putting my own money down on these lines as well. I will be wagering them, and I will be wagering throughout the season as well. So we're putting the work in, and we feel confident about the picks. So if they work out, it's good for everyone. So yeah, as you said, without further ado, my first pick for this season, and I do feel really good about this one, and I'm getting on board the Browns hype train for the 2019 season. Nick Chubb, over 1,050.5 rushing yards. I mean, I'm struggling to really see a possibility where that situation doesn't happen. This feels like free money to me. He was the starter for 9 games last season, and he rushed for 995 yards. A few of those games were in the anemic Hugh Jackson offense. The offense is going to be better. Baker's going to progress. They brought in Odell Beckham, and no defense is going to stack the box against that team anymore. And actually, he faced 8+ men in the box on 34% of his carries last season, and still had a yards per carry of 5.2. He was the 4th highest or 5th highest in the league at facing 8 or more men in the box at that rate. So I just find it very unlikely that Nick Chubb is going to go under 1,050.5 yards this season.
I think that's a pretty safe one. The only thing that could probably go wrong is if he starts off a bit slow, and then when Kareem Hunt comes back from suspension, he steals snaps. But aside from that unlikely scenario, as you said, he had a great year last year with stacked boxes, and it's only going to get better now that the Browns are a much better team. Yeah,
no doubt. And with Kareem Hunt, I don't think we see him on the field till at least week 10, because he's suspended 8 weeks. He can't even train with the team, be in the facility. So I'd be shocked if we saw anything more than a couple of snaps for him in week 9. So I don't think you see anything significant till at least week 10. And if Chubb gets going, he might be close to this. He might be averaging 90 yards, 100 yards a game. He's got that talent. So
yeah,
who's your first one?
So my first one is Le'Veon Bell under rushing 8.5. Let me start that again. Le'Veon Bell rushing touchdowns under 8.5. Everybody gets get mixed up with Le'Veon Bell because he gets a lot of receiving touchdowns. So you think intuitively that's a really low number, but in fact he's only reached 9 rushing touchdowns once in his career. That was a career high. So that's a very, very high line. He's 27 years old this year, which is, well, it's young in football terms, it's old in running back years. He's a year removed from the game, and he's gone from having a beastly run-blocking offensive line in Pittsburgh to one that's not so good in New York. And, I mean, PFF, so Pro Football Focus, agrees with me. I think they have it at like 5.5. And look, I trust them over the odds makers at Sportsbet. So for me, that's my free money betting line for the season.
Yeah, I mean, for a running back to get those high rushing touchdowns, you want them associated with good offenses. And quite frankly, I don't associate the Jets with being a good offense. I don't particularly trust Adam Gase. I do like Sam Darnold. I think he's a special talent. I think he should take a nice step forward this season, but I don't see how that offense moves the ball up and down the field enough for Bell to get those opportunities to hit the 9 touchdown rushing mark. So that's a nice pick. Sticking with the running back theme, I've gone for Kerryon Johnson. His line rushing yards this season is 985.5 on Sportsbet, and I think he's going to hit the over there as well. Now, he did miss a little bit of time with injuries, but like you mentioned at the top, like I feel pretty confident about this one. I think he's going to play the majority of the games this season. And the new offensive coordinator coming in, Darrell Bevell, he runs the football. He has a history of doing that. His running backs, going back to 2006, averaged 335 carries per season. Now, that's the entire running back core. But Kerryon Johnson only needs to get about 230 of those. He's an efficient running back. He's got talent. And even assuming his yards per carry, which is hard to sustain at 5.4, drops to 4.4 with the increase in volume that he's likely to see, he would still hit the over if he took his 230 rushing attempts. We know what Darrell Bevell is. He's a run-first offensive coach. Matt Patricia wants to play defense, control the clock, and run the football. And I think Kerryon Johnson quite comfortably goes over 985.5 rushing yards this season.
Yeah, I think that's a really good bet. I think that part of that line, part of the reason that line is so low is because of the Detroit fact that people are just used to Detroit running backs not, getting bulk yardage. But you've got to look at the player and not the team history here. And as you said, they've got a new coordinator who loves to run the ball. Kerryon Johnson's by far the most talented back on that roster. And their offensive line's been improving steadily over the past few years. So I think that's a really, really solid value bet.
Awesome.
Now, you mentioned him in passing before, and I got a little bit excited because if you like a guy, it bodes well for my picks. Sam Darnold. So the over-under is 23.5 touchdowns, and I went with the over. So he actually so everyone knows he struggled for quite a bit of last season. He still managed to get 17 touchdowns in 13 starts. His team added Bell, who's a great receiving back and will be good for a few receiving touchdowns. They've got Jamison Crowder in the slot, who's an underrated slot receiving threat. And most importantly, I think that sophomore quarterbacks young sophomore quarterbacks often see the biggest jump in yardage and touchdowns. I mean, we saw what happened with Goff between his rookie year and his sophomore year. There's been quite a few other examples of that over the years where quarterbacks have struggled as a rookie and just broken out as a sophomore. As you mentioned, Darnold's special talent. I think he was the highest graded quarterback over the last 5 weeks of the season, according to Pro Football Focus. So, he's got the skill. And I think 24 touchdowns is quite a low number, actually, to hit. So, assuming he starts all 16 games, I think he gets that easily.
Yeah, I agree with that. I said I think the offense might struggle and might not have the luxury to run the football, particularly if the defense is struggling. They don't have any cornerbacks. The Jets do not have cornerbacks. I think teams are going to be able to score against them. And it means they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. He's got a nice deep outlet in Robbie Anderson. I think he's a very underrated wide receiver in terms of the NFL. I think he's one of the better deep threats in the league. And as you mentioned, 17 touchdowns as a rookie, the youngest quarterback to start in NFL history, I believe. So this guy's going to mature. He's going to improve, and with that should come some more touchdowns. And it's not a huge jump, 24 touchdowns. So I am a fan of that line as well. My next pick is a quarterback. So staying with quarterbacks, and I've got two for this gentleman. It's Superman. It's Cam Newton, and I've got two lines for his rushing. Over 499.5 yards. Now, I really like this one because in 6 of his 8 seasons in the NFL, he smashed that line. And last season, he had 488 rushing yards in 13.5 games. We know he missed some time with his shoulder injury, but he was one more scramble away from hitting that with, three games to spare. So I really think that's a likely scenario that he hits that. And the second one I have, and I really like this is over on Bet Easy, and I was attracted by the price at $2.10. Over 5.5 rushing touchdowns. He is a goal line back. Cam Newton, a fullback monster. No quarterback in the NFL gets across the goal line like Cam Newton does. 5 of his 8 seasons in the NFL, he's scored more than 6 or more touchdowns. Now, it is a little bit risky here because Christian McCaffrey was so outstanding last year. But if Cam plays 16 games, I would be truly shocked if he doesn't score six rushing touchdowns. I would be amazed if that was the case. And at $2.10, that's a very attractive price to have a little flutter on that one.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that, especially the rushing yardage. 590, was it 599 yards? You said was the line.
Oh,
Um,
499.
oh Jesus,
499.
that's even lower.
Yeah.
That's not very much when you break it down to a per game basis.
Nope.
Even just with goal line work, he could easily blow past that. And as you mentioned, with McCaffrey, I know he's a threat to, take some goal line touches, but the Panthers coaching staff has also mentioned they want to, lighten his workload a little bit going into this year, so he doesn't take as many hits. And when you've got a 6'5", 260-pound monster for a quarterback, you'd be stupid not to use that under the goal line. So I think I think it's a very likely, especially at $2.10 value. I think it's a very
that's exactly what I was attracted by. One of these overlines, you're looking around the $1.80, somewhere between $1.80 and $1.90 for those over/under lines. But this one was particularly attractive. And you just mentioned Christian McCaffrey there, and that they're going to scale back his touches a little bit. I mean, he had his historic number of touches and targets for a running back last season. So I would be shocked if he had the same usage rate. He will definitely be massively involved, and you should love him for fantasy. He's a great pick this season. Arguments for him to be the number one pick overall. But I'd be surprised if he had or exceeded the same number of touches that he had last season. I think it would just be slightly less.
Yeah, I agree. So my next guy, if it wasn't for the injury factor baked into his value, this would probably be my favourite line of all of them. So it's our man Odell Beckham Jr., over 1,150 and a half yards receiving. So, I mean, this is the man that was the fastest player to reach 5,000 receiving yards in his career in NFL history. Like, he's a generational talent, and he did that playing on the New York Giants with 55-year-old quarterback Eli Manning. If you've heard any of my Sideline Spice power rankings, you'd know how much I rag on the Giants. I don't have anything against them. I just think they're like a really poorly run franchise. And Odell, despite being in that environment, he managed to be a beast. And you can go from having the Giants O-line and Eli Manning throwing the ball to you to having Baker Mayfield, who's my favourite second-year quarterback, and Jarvis Landry in the slot to take pressure away from you, and the best running back stable in the league, and depth across the entire field in the Cleveland Browns. And I mean, 1150, like that's an absurdly low number.
All health baked into that line. Yeah, absolutely correct. If he plays 14 games, he'll smash that. Baker Mayfield was one of the best deep ball throwers in the second half of last season when he finally got rid of Hugh Jackson. So I'm so on board with that pick. I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I think he's got something to prove as well. He felt mistreated in New York towards the end of his time there. So this is probably going to be the most focused OBJ we're going to see for a while, which is kind of scary.
I agree. And the one factor that, it's hard to put a value or weight on these sort of intangible things, but he's playing with his best friend. His best friend through high school, they went to college together. That can really improve his focus. He has been a bit distracted off the field at times. And Jarvis Landry is a consummate professional, and they're going to push each other day in, day out. So I really think Odell's primed for a huge, huge season. The next guy for me, going back to running backs, I quite like a few running backs this season. I've talked about this guy since the turn of the year. It's a little bit of a homer pick from my guy at FSU, Devontae Freeman, coming back from that leg injury in 2018. His line is very low, and again at $1.87, I'm liking it on BetEasy. The line is a little bit lower there than it is on Sportsbet. It's 850.5 yards. So again, like Odell Beckham, injury factor is baked into that. But I also think that's a little bit of a recency bias by the line makers there. If he plays 14 games, he's going to smash this over. I'm hedging on his ability to stay healthy. And this is not a guy with a crazy injury history like people like to make out. In his first 4 seasons in the NFL, he missed 3 games, which for a running back that initiates contact and runs the way he does, it's a pretty low number. He surpassed this line on 3 straight seasons up until last year. And now Coleman is gone. There's less, competition for touches carrying the ball. I know Ito Smith's there, Kodri Ollison, Brian Hill, but it's Devontae Freeman as the one and everyone else fighting for the scraps. They've improved their offensive line. They're a good offense. So, yeah, I think Freeman hits this in 3/4 of a season.
Yeah. I was about to mention the Coleman factor as well, like the fact that he exceeded those numbers most of his years in the league with probably the best backup running back in the league running behind him. It's a testament to Freeman's ability. And while he is 27 years old, he is the unquestioned 1, 2, and 3 in the Atlanta backfield. So health pending, I think that's a very, very low number. And I think Betty's, you've dropped the ball. Like a lot of people are going to be jumping on that, and I think I might as well.
Yeah, myself included. I'll be getting on that. So who have you got cooking up next?
So this one I don't feel quite as good against because I've been burnt by him in the past. But this is actually argued to me by Sidelines by some analyst Ryan. Marcus Mariota over 3,030.5 yards. So he has had a spotty career. There's no denying that. He was a top, number 2 overall pick out of college for a reason. He does have the talent. He has shown flashes of brilliance. Continuity is going to be a big thing for him. He's got a top 5 offensive line that's going to have played together another year, and he's young and, talented. He's got Corey Davis, who another super talented player who hasn't shown his full potential, but big body, and he's a fast mover. And they've added AJ Brown to that mix as well. So, while I don't feel amazing about that, 3,030 yards, it's an average of less than 190 a game he needs to clear. So he doesn't have to be a world beater to do that. He just needs to stay healthy, throw the ball a little bit to beat that number. So, look, while I don't think he's a slam dunk to clear that number, it is a very, very low bar. And when you see value, you sometimes got to bank on growth from the people around him as well. So,
yeah, I really like that pick. And, a few of the names there on top of Corey Davis and AJ Brown, they brought in one of the best slot receivers from last season, Adam Humphries, who's really going to help him move the chains and keep drives going. Continue to have possession of the football. They get Delaney Walker back, who I think was a big loss for them last year, who's still got some juice left in the tank. So they've got some weapons there, absolutely. Now, they're going to be a run-first team. They had one of the highest run-to-pass ratios in the league last season, and also when they were either tied or trailing, they were one of the most run-heavy football teams. However, I do think that is a low bar that's set, that has factored that in. And I think that, they'll run some play action. They've got a deep threat with Corey Davis there. I do like what the Titans are doing. And was it 3,030?
Yeah, 3,030.5.
Yeah, so it's a low bar to set. And for a guy, if he keeps all feeling in his hands and can play 16 games, I think he'll hit that quite easily. And I think the franchise is going to want to give him 16 games. They need to make a decision on his future. And I think he's going to be given every opportunity to prove that he's the guy to get that second contract in the NFL with the Tennessee Titans. I don't buy this, Ryan Tannehill might be the start. I don't buy that for a second. I think they want one last season of give Mariota every opportunity to prove his worth to the franchise and get that second contract.
No, I agree. And like you mentioned it before, it's hard to quantify the human factor, but the whole contract year thing that you just touched upon is a factor. Because if he doesn't clear that 3,000 yards and he does have another rough year, he's going to be a backup with his next contract. And nobody wants to be a backup in the NFL. So, it's make or break time for Mariota. Prove me right. Make me look good.
Here's hoping he does that. Sticking with the theme of a dual threat quarterback, I'm going with your Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson because his line is even lower than Marcus Mariota's, and it's over 2,900 passing yards, $1.82 there on Sportsbet, and it's an incredibly low line. And I know he was historically poor in passing in terms of his output last season. He averaged 159 yards per game when he was the starter. On a 16-game pace, that's only 2,500 yards, so some way off. However, he had 17 rush attempts per game, and that is just simply unsustainable. A 22 and a half pass attempts per game to 17 rush attempts per game, it's just not sustainable. And there were several reasons for that. One, they were, putting together an offense on the fly for him because he did nothing in training camp and preseason. He was there as a gadget quarterback. He was never meant to start last season. And then Greg Roman comes in as the offensive coordinator, and Greg Roman has a history of getting the best out of these dual threat quarterbacks. Over his last 3 full seasons as offensive coordinator, Greg Roman's quarterbacks had 425 pass attempts, which is 26 per game. And if you give Lamar Jackson 26 attempts per game, even at his low yards per attempt, which is about 7, give him a little bit of improvement there, and which you would expect. You would expect him to improve as a passer. He improved every single week he was a starter. They've added him some weapons in Marquise Brown, a freak in Miles Boykin. They got the nice collection of tight ends there. They got Justice Hill, who's going to take some dump offs to the house. I guarantee it. So 2,900 yards, I think, is a nice line for Lamar Jackson to hit there. He's not going to smash it. I think he's going to be around that 3,200 mark. But I think he should comfortably clear the 2,900, which is why I'll be putting my money down on that $1.82 line.
Yeah, funny you mentioned the 3,200 figure because that's exactly where I have him projected for the year. Look, even being a Ravens homer, I don't think he's going to set the world on fire with his passing next year. However, having watched a ridiculous amount of preseason footage, his footwork is a lot more consistent. He's not side-arming throws when he's on the move. We actually have weapons outside now that you mentioned before when we've had a historically poor wide receiver group. As you mentioned before, it's a low bar. There's also that second-year improvement factored in, having the offense tailored around you and not designed on the fly. And they have mentioned that they're going to scale back the rushing attempts because while he is going to have quite a few design runs and probably more than any other quarterback in the NFL, 17 is more than most bell cow running backs have per game. So that's definitely going to be scaled back. So I think that 2,900 is a reasonable bar to clear, and I think he's going to get past that comfortably.
And one more thing on Lamar as well. Historically through college, this is a guy who showed marked improvement in all of the areas that you'd like to see in his completion percentage, yards per attempt each year in college. So this is a kid who is not adverse to learning and applying himself and improving his skill set as a passer. That's all I just wanted to say there.
No, I agree. I'm excited for this season as a Ravens fan. So my final pick is Big Ben. It's under 4,325 and a half passing yards. So I know we've just mentioned
Big Ben, who just led the NFL in passing yards.
Yes. give me a second. It's not because I'm a Ravens homer. This one was discussed. This one was discussed with Ryan as well. So. And Ryan's a Patriots fan for those of you playing along at home. But he made some really good points and we talked about this. So first of all, we mentioned the injury factor as well. Big Ben plays banged up more than probably any quarterback in the league, which is admirable. But, the longer your career goes, the less you can bounce back from those knocks. So, within that line, there's a bit of injury risk baked into it. But not only that, but losing probably the best wide receiver of the last decade in Antonio Brown is nothing short of monumental. Mm-hmm. Now, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is outstanding. For those of you playing along in fantasy, he's going to be the top 20 player overall. He's a monster, but I think their number 2 wide receiver is either James Washington or Dante Moncrief, the way the depth chart is. It's Moncrief right now. And look, I love Dante Moncrief, but Dante Moncrief is not Antonio Brown. So you've got an injury-prone quarterback, having downgraded from all-time great talent to a guy with a lot of potential, but hasn't really put it together for a full season. And I know, like for me, it's just like can Big Ben blow past that? Yes, like he did that as recently as last year. I just think that the Brown factor can't be overstated. Like, I think that there's going to be some regression. Like, you know, he can't just look up the field now and just know that his guy is going to be there. Like, and that extra second of hesitation means more sacks, more hits he's going to take. Yeah, again, this is probably the most risky of my 5 picks that I put in there. After all, he did lead the league in passing yardage last year.
But he led the league. He had a crazy outlier season in terms of pass attempts because the defense was so horrible. I mean, he had to drop back and throw it for 40, 50 times a game sometimes. So definitely some regression coming in his pass attempts. So the more I think about this, and the more you've talked about it, I'm starting to get that one. And the other thing I will say is one thing that Big Ben does for a big guy, he extends the play as well as any quarterback in the NFL. But part of what made him so productive at extending the play is Antonio Brown. You can't cover that man for more than a second and a half, 2 seconds. He will be open. And Big Ben knew exactly where he would be going. He would find a way. He would trail downfield, and he would pick up chunk plays consistently, multiple times per game. It would look, they'd get on third down, and Antonio Brown would be there for a 20-yard reception, sometimes more. So someday we'd get him involved in screens as well, and Antonio Brown would pick up yardage that way. So he's a huge loss. Make no mistake. I know he's losing his mind a little bit, and he's causing all of this chaos for the Oakland Raiders. But like you said, maybe the best receiver of the past decade. And Big Ben, helped Antonio Brown at times, but Antonio Brown, without question, made Big Ben look phenomenal, particularly from a statistics perspective. So one of the most efficient receivers we've ever seen.
Agreed. And also, just to add to that as well, you mentioned the passing attempts. So he's only cleared 600 passing attempts twice in his career. They're the only 2 years where Big Ben's actually surpassed that number. That's his line. So 2 out of 15 years he's passed that line. One was last year, and one was 2014, I think it was. And the thing that both those years had in common was he played 16 games, and he's played 16 games 4 times in his 15-year career. So, you're banking on him being fully healthy, and then in that fully healthy season, having a near historical number of pass attempts and being just as efficient without his number one target and one of the best receivers I've seen in my lifetime. So I think that, while on the surface it looks like a bit of a risk, I think that he's a prime candidate for some overall yardage regression.
I love it. I'm convinced. We've talked me into it, and and this is my final pick now. Going back to a wide receiver, a guy who's Antonio Brown replaced, really, and that's Amari Cooper. He's gone over to the Dallas Cowboys, and his receiving line is set at 1,080.5 yards with a price of $1.87. Now, he has only cleared this line one time in his NFL career. He's had multiple 1,000-yard seasons, but he's around the very low 1,000 mark. However, the pace that he showed in Dallas with Dak Prescott last season should see him really easily crack this mark. He will have his up and down games. He will be a bit boom or bust, but his 2018 pace should be the benchmark, which was 725 yards in 9 games with Dak Prescott. He averaged 8.4 targets per game. He never saw fewer than 5 targets, and his 9.5 yards per target was the highest of his career as well. So that role that they're using him in, they were using him more predominantly as a deeper threat. They have other guys to come underneath Michael Gallup. They replaced Cole Beasley with Randall Cobb, and there will be some dump offs to Zeke Elliott or Tony Pollard, whoever the running back is for this season. So I really like Amari Cooper to take that line over the 1,080, and I'm projecting him out for about 1,150, 1,200 yards around that mark. So I think he should quite comfortably clear the 1,080.5 mark.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome one. I mean, Cooper was a top 5 pick for a reason coming out of Alabama. He runs probably some of the nicest routes I've seen in the Pro Football League, but he's also got top end speed as well. They misused him in Oakland, though. You mentioned that in Dallas they're taking advantage of that speed and using him more as a deep threat. In Oakland, for some reason, they got him to run more underneath stuff. And, Derek Carr had that one really outstanding season years back. But then after that, he's regressed hard for whatever reason. And Cooper just didn't look like he was comfortable there. But as you mentioned, when he came to Dallas, he was a different beast.
And this was on 1 week of, he had the bye week, and typically receivers move teams and need to get chemistry with the quarterback. They clicked like this, and with an off season together, working out another, time to work with Dak. I think it's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, I agree. Dak really, really looked for him all over the field, and it showed. 80 yards receiving per game, I think it was, when he moved over to Dallas. So, assuming health, and Cooper has missed maybe 3 games in his career, I think it is. So it's pretty reasonable to assume he plays a full slate of games. I think that projection's more focusing on his past in Oakland rather than factoring in his new situation in Dallas. So I think that's a very solid bet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, as we wrap things up here, I know it's been a lot of positive talk, and we've only got good things to say about our lines, but it's because we there's dozens of lines out there at the moment, and we've gone through and picked out the ones that we really like. So that's why we're bringing this positive, good information to you. We think it's actionable information. I like all of these. I'm going to be putting some of my hard-earned coin on all of these lines, and some of Lucas's as well there. So I'm excited for this season. Hopefully we hit on half of these. I'd be very happy.
Yeah, and look, I might even do just a silly, a $5 bet, turning them all into a multi, because as unlikely as that is, if Lewis and I both happen to be right on 11 legs, could be fun times for us.
We can retire.
We can retire, and we can do this full time for a living. But yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna put some separate bets on some of the ones Lewis said. Going into it, he actually, I was skeptical on a couple of them, but he's legitimately won me over. I think they're very well researched lines. He's putting his money where his mouth is, and Lewis is one of the smarter football people I know. So, I will follow him on some of those for sure.
You're making me blush, man. You're making me blush. But this has been really fun. I'm really glad that we've got to do this for the preseason, or season long lines. It's a little bit different to what we'll be doing during the season. And like I said, I look forward to doing these on a weekly basis, bringing them to you hopefully before, or within time, so you can action this information as well. And hopefully Ryan's going to be able to join us at some point as well.
It'd be nice, right? Of all of us, I think Ryan's the most passionate about the punt. So yeah, it'd be wonderful to have his valuable wisdom when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Bring that degenerate on here. Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be fun. But we're looking forward to bringing this to you every week during the season, hopefully. And early enough so that you can actually do something about it, and we're not just sitting there in hindsight showing you stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to it. And so we'll see you for week 1 of the NFL season. Luca, you have a lovely evening, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
You too, Lewis. I can't wait.
See you, mate.
See ya.